Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. A young survivor of the Israel-Hamas war received a warm welcome when she arrived at the Orlando International Airport on Monday. 1 year ago today, December 5th, 2023, Hala apartment building was bombed in the central region of Gaza. She and her parents survived the attack, but the 17-year-old younger brother was killed, along with 3 cousins. The home was destroyed, the surviving family displaced. Hala herself had severe 2nd and 3rd degree burns. She's in Orlando now to receive specialized treatment for her physical wounds and care for the emotional impact of the trauma that she's experienced. She was brought to Central Florida by way of the Heal Palestine Global Healing Program. The nonprofit provides care for the children impacted by the violence in Gaza. Lena Keswani with Heal Palestine joins Engage to talk about Hala's journey to recovery. Keswani began our conversation by describing the tragic night that changed the lives of Hala and her family.
Hala had 2 brothers and a sister. She lived with her siblings and her mother and her father in their home in a Shujaiya neighborhood, and I think that's more northern Gaza. Well, they were told to evacuate in December of 2023. They were told that they needed to go south, that they would be safe. So they moved more south to central area of Gaza, where they lived in a small apartment in a building. And at that time, a little bit in later December, the apartment building where they lived was bombed. And Hala was burned in her torso, chest, arm, neck area. And her brother burned to death in front of her in the bomb. And she also lost 3 cousins that same day. Her mother and father were injured from the bombing as well. And before October, they were living a normal life. Mother, father worked. Hala was a high school student. This is her last year of high school. She's a senior, and she's trying to finish her education online now. But just like any other 17-year-old, she was studying, enjoying life. She has hobbies. She was just a normal, average teenage girl. And this very much changed her life, apart from being displaced and, being injured and losing her brother, and just turned her world upside down.
How did she connect with Heal Palestine?
Heal Palestine it's a nonprofit organization, of course, and we're just committed to providing life-saving healthcare and support to children, youth that are impacted, families that are impacted by the ongoing crisis in Palestine. And we have teams all over Gaza that are working to provide food, medical care. We have a field hospital in Mawasi, which is in Khan Yunis, central Gaza, that has treated over 300,000 people since June. So these teams, people seek them, especially through the hospital that we have there. And they ask, where can we apply to try to evacuate our children? Our child suffered this injury or that injury or needs help. And we do these intake forms, and we try our best. A very small fraction of kids are able to be evacuated. The main thing is getting the acceptance letter from a hospital here in the US, and that's how we get these kids here. Without that piece of paper, we can't even try. So our teams on the ground are in contact with, of course, the people of Gaza. That's who they serve. So once a child is identified, we also have a team in the West Bank that starts the coordination, starts applying for the visa to get permission for the child to be able to be evacuated. It was much easier to do this when the Rafah crossing was open. Now it's much more difficult because that avenue is closed. But that's how we identify them, and then we start the process. And it's quite a long process. It's taken months and months, 7 to 8 months, I think, for a child to even be evacuated from the time they apply till the time they can leave. So it's quite a long process.
Is the process of getting someone out of this war zone and out of that country continuing to get harder? Do you find there are more obstacles coming up?
The occupation government is very, very difficult, and there's really no rhyme or reason to who they allow to leave. It's just, I think, pure luck for that child. And they shouldn't be held back from getting medical care if a hospital approves them and accepts them to get pro bono medical care. I don't see a reason why any government would want to keep that child from leaving. But like I said, there's no rhyme or reason to what they decide or who they decide can leave.
And back to Hala, what kind of treatment is she receiving, and why Orlando specifically?
So we have a large network of medical professionals, volunteers, supporters that are going out, just like, I try to go to my local hospitals here in Tampa to see if I can get a letter of acceptance for a child. This certain hospital in Orlando agreed to treat her burn injuries, and it's just through networking. We reach out to these hospitals and healthcare professionals, and if we're fortunate enough to be accepted, we run with it. Whatever child we can bring, we do.
And what's next for her? Does she eventually go back to Gaza? Can she apply for asylum status? What's next?
So we do not encourage the asylum applications for these children, only because for us to be able to do this, we agree to send them back once they're done with treatment, and we don't want to keep any child from coming here. So we do not encourage that at all, the asylum seeking, but they do return to Egypt. They don't return to Gaza because at this point, the policy is if you leave, you don't come back. And can you imagine, as a mother, Hala's mom, having to make a choice to leave, her other two children and her husband, not knowing if she'll ever be able to see them in the near future, maybe years from now. Who knows when this conflict will be over? And she made that decision so that she could have her daughter treated here. It was an opportunity, and she took it, knowing that she will not be able to go back to Gaza. She would have to go back to Egypt when her daughter's treatment is done. So it's really a difficult thing because they're having to not only, have to endure the big change of moving from, one country to another, the pain of leaving your family behind and not knowing when you'll see them again. So they don't go back to Gaza. And, hopefully when the war is over, she will be able to go back and reunite with her family. But at this point, it's up in the air. She finishes treatment, she goes back to Egypt. But we still keep in touch with them and take care of them and provide them what they need while they're in Egypt.
Lena Keswani is a representative for the non-political nonprofit organization Heal Palestine, founded to help the children impacted by the violence in Gaza. There's more ahead here on Engage. Non-admitted companies aren't bound by the same regulations as traditional home insurers, but more Floridians are turning to them for coverage. An investigative reporter tracking that trend joins us to explain the outlook and the impact to homeowners here. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, Lindsay Matteoni spent years trying to get a position in the White House as a holiday decorator, and she almost gave up.
All the years that I've been looked over, I thought I was going to get another rejection letter back, so to speak. And I received it, and I read it about 6 or 7 times at about 4:00 in the morning. And I just started to bawl.
Matteoni joins Engage to talk about Barbie, Taylor Swift, and decorating a White House Christmas tree. First, though, for years now, Floridians have tried to navigate the state's troubled home insurance market. Claims from extreme weather events like hurricanes have only amplified the issues of finding affordable policies. Non-admitted companies can offer insurance plans without meeting state standards. In her investigation, Bloomberg News reporter Sophie Alexander found Florida homeowners are turning to that lightly regulated market that's actually designed to cover things like fireworks factories. Alexander joins Engage to explain her findings. She started our conversation by describing what makes non-admitted policies different from conventional ones.
Typically, when you're thinking of your regular homeowner's insurance, you're thinking of admitted insurance. You're not hearing these terms used very much because traditionally homeowners haven't had to think about this. Non-admitted insurance is something that was designed a long time ago for really complicated cases where insurers needed a lot more flexibility in writing policies. So things like fireworks factories and nuclear waste projects are the examples that people use often. And so the main difference here is regulation. The difference between non-admitted and admitted is that admitted insurance is regulated heavily by the states in which they operate. Non-admitted carriers or non-admitted insurers aren't actually licensed in the states in which they're operating. They're actually called foreign or alien insurers if they're outside of the US. And so they're not regulated by the states. And that means that there's no controls on pricing. There's no regulation in what has to be in your typical contract. And the most important thing is that there is no state guarantee fund that they're paying into, which means that if your non-admitted company goes bankrupt, then there is no guarantee that your claims will be paid.
A couple of follow-ups. Let me start with just where did this concept come from?
It's been around for a while, and it has really only been used in the commercial insurance market, so insuring businesses. And again, it's like if you think about a fireworks factory or a sports stadium, these are the kinds of things that are not normal. Like when you're measuring what the risks are associated with insuring a fireworks factory or a sports stadium, it's really complicated and you need to get into all sorts of nitty-gritty details. And to do that, insurance companies have required more flexibility in writing those policies. And so that's what this whole industry has existed for, is those complicated situations.
So what exactly does a homeowner then get with this policy? Who are the homeowners these policies would appeal to? What are they paying compared to conventional policies?
Well, the thing is, if you're a homeowner, you would rather not be in the non-admitted market because they don't have the same protections that admitted insurers do. If you're a homeowner, you're really only going to the non-admitted market if you don't have another choice. And so that's why you're seeing this market grow more in places like California and Florida, where you're also hearing all these stories of insurance companies, the big ones, leaving the state and dropping homeowners or limiting coverage in certain places. It's in these places where you're going to find people who don't have any other options. And so they have the choice between ending up with non-admitted insurance or with the state-backed insurer of last resort.
Sophie, you document the growth of these policies in Florida, as you just mentioned. Is the growth attributed to not having other options?
Yeah, so oftentimes you can see the non-admitted market grow in places after a big disaster, but also it has to do with generally the appetite that admitted insurance companies have for writing policies in these areas. So in Florida, there were a lot of complaints over bogus lawsuits against insurance companies. And then when the state made it harder for people to sue their insurance companies, then you see the appetite grow from admitted carriers. So you're going to see less non-admitted carriers in the market. So really, typically, you see this grow after big disasters, but also just generally after admitted and carriers leave the market. And that can have to do with regulation as well.
How is it legal for a non-guaranteed insurance company to operate?
This has sort of existed as this backstop. It's been a lever that has existed in the market for a reason. It just isn't supposed to be for homeowners. So it does have a purpose in the market. You know, if you talk to non-admitted companies or insurance companies generally, you know, people need insurance oftentimes. If you're a business, you need to make sure that you have insurance. And so if you can't get it anywhere other than the non-admitted market, then that's too bad, but you're going to need it from the non-admitted market. And so it's really just that insurance companies, their whole job is to measure risk. And if the risk is so high that they need to be able to write the contracts very specifically or raise prices at a moment's notice, then they're going to require that they be able to do that. And so for insurance commissioners, whose job has traditionally been to regulate and protect consumers in the insurance market, non-admitted insurance does have a role to play. And especially in this moment where all these admitted carriers are leaving the market, you can see why they're not keen to get rid of them or regulate them.
Okay, so how are regulators and lawmakers approaching the non-admitted policies?
Well, at this point, it's still a very small segment of the market. So we really focused on Florida, California, and Louisiana. Florida and California's insurance commissioners didn't want to make anyone available for comment. The California Department of Insurance did write to me in an email and essentially said, this is still a small part of the market, but we don't regulate these types of companies. And so we would encourage consumers to avoid them where possible. And when I spoke with someone from the Louisiana Department of Insurance, the spokesperson there, they said, I don't really have very much interest in regulating these because we need insurance companies. We're getting to a point where there's no one left to insure homeowners in the state. And so without these kinds of companies as well in the market, we would really be in big trouble.
And Sophie, your investigation is part of a larger project looking at the correlation between climate change and insurance availability. Connect the dots for us here in Florida with the state and these non-admitted policies.
Yeah, so Florida's insurance market has never recovered since Hurricane Andrew back in 1992. Before that, people just didn't realize how much damage a storm could do. We're talking billions of dollars of damage. And so insurance companies left. And since then, there haven't really been major national insurance companies that are issuing policies in the state. It's really been a patchwork of these regional companies and also the state-backed insurer of last resort called Citizens. Citizens has grown enormous over the past few years. At the end of 2023, you're looking at more than 1.4 million households insured by this insurer of last resort. So that tells you that the market is really in trouble. So, when I talk to people, they say this is a sign that people shouldn't be living in these places. But of course, you can't tell people to leave their home, especially at the scale that we're talking about. You can't tell everyone in Florida to leave, but that's what sort of this non-admitted market is doing. It's a warning signal telling people, hey, this is dangerous, and we're telling you that by saying it's really expensive to insure this property, but also providing coverage to the people who are living there when they can't find it elsewhere. Again, I want to reiterate that this is still a small part of the market. It's growing. And also, it has been really concentrated in wealthy areas because when you think about this, for an insurance company to insure a $20 million home that's right on the waterfront, that's a different story from insuring a $400,000 home inland. So you are seeing this more in very wealthy zip codes, but it also is playing out at the other end of the spectrum with smaller, cheaper homes in low-income areas that admitted insurers don't really see as worth their time of taking the trouble to estimate how much it should cost to insure this property. So you're seeing at both ends of the spectrum, but all in all, this market is growing, and Florida residents could expect it to continue to do so.
That was Bloomberg News reporter Sophie Alexander. Yesterday, Citizens Property Insurance Corporation released information saying their policy count dropped to its lowest level in 2 years, and they are seeing renewed interest from private companies to enter or expand in the Florida market. Citizens president and CEO called the trends encouraging signs as they continue efforts to return to their role as Florida's insurer of last resort. This afternoon, we're talking about the power of listening. Over the past 6 months, we've brought together Central Floridians, primarily strangers, with different political views to interview one another and discover what they have in common. It's part of Central Florida Public Media's partnership with StoryCorps for their One Small Step initiative. So we're taking the idea of connecting with people in our community a step further with our Building Bridges Together event this weekend. I'm joined in studio now by Central Florida Public Media Community Collaboration Director Rebecca Fernandez and Abe Abaraya, a facilitator of these One Small Step conversations. So the three of us are going to be out there on Saturday. Rebecca, let me start with you. Just give us an overview. Tell everyone a bit more about our event.
I am so excited about this event. It's a fun, really unique opportunity to connect with people in our community with whom you might never otherwise connect and engage in really meaningful conversations that bridge gaps and create pathways of understanding. This is an opportunity to discover the power of listening. You can share your own stories and participate in activities designed to inspire empathy and connection. It's really going to be an immersive experience in engaging across difference. We've got this sort of set up so that folks who walk in the door are going to experience 4 different opportunities to really be immersed in the One Small Step listening experience. So we've got audio listening stations where folks will be able to walk in and sit down and hear conversations. There'll be a Q&A card game where folks will have an opportunity to be guided through getting to know their neighbors better. There'll be lounge conversations where folks can have an intimate conversation with someone that's been featured in One Small Step conversations that they've heard on air. And there'll even be a recording booth where you can sit down with someone who you meet there at the event on Saturday and record a conversation, a mini One Small Step conversation right there at the event. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So I know we're putting a lot of work into this weekend's event, and I want to highlight something really that's quite different, I think, that we don't hear about a lot. Abe, tell us more about you're actually yourself working on setting up this recording booth.
So we're going to be using the actual kit that we use to record these One Small Step conversations. So people will actually have the exact same experience doing these One Small Step conversations at the event that they would have had if they came here to our studios or if they're one of the people who had conversations with us out in the field, because we did do a lot of these conversations out in different libraries and different parts all across Central Florida. We actually had conversations here in Orange County. We had them in Brevard, Lake, Marion County. So we hit a lot of different parts of Central Florida with these conversations. And so that kit's kind of had a little bit of wear and tear on it. It's had a little bit of mileage on it. So it's going to get, a little bit more mileage at the event. And we hope people kind of get the full experience with that. And, we'll be using a lot of the same kind of questions and techniques that we do with the One Small Step conversations during that as well. So hopefully people will have that, be able to sit down and kind of feel like they're having that exact experience as the people who were able to do it and that you've heard some of these conversations on air.
That's certainly a big part of the event on Saturday. I'll also be hosting a panel discussion Saturday. So Rebecca and Abe, give us a little taste, a little preview of what to expect with the panel.
So we're going to have a lot of these conversations that you may have heard, that you maybe will remember. We're actually going to have some of those people, those conversation partners there together at the event. So you'll be able to hear a little bit of the conversation, and then you'll also be able to hear from the participants themselves. And we'll be having that conversation there, and we're going to have 3 of those sets of conversations. And so that'll be a good part of the panel discussion. And then we're also going to have some experts from the University of Central Florida who are going to be talking not just about these One Small Step conversations that we've had, but sort of how to take some real tips for these and bring that into your life and get that going forward so you can have these conversations, not just with, people but people that maybe are a neighbor or a family member, somebody that you feel like you need to work on having that kind of difficult conversation, or maybe you're a little bit worried about it or nervous about it. And hopefully this will give you some tips and get you actually be able to have that conversation.
I think, Sharon, too, folks will have an opportunity to hear from people who have been through these conversations about what that process was like for them. They'll also have an opportunity to hear about the impact that these conversations have had on their lives. And then we'll talk a little bit about sort of what's next, right? Like, what happens now, right? After the elections are over, what does this mean for our region when we talk about bridge building, when we talk about what happens now in our community and how important is this work in coming together and what else is going on? What else is happening around us? I think that's the kind of conversation I think we all really want to be having, and we hope to bring this conversation there.
Abe, can you give us a setup for what we're about to hear now?
Yeah, we actually are going to be having some of the folks from StoryCorps as well. And because we are one of 7 hubs across the country that have been doing these One Small Step hubs where we're bringing people together for these conversations. And so we want to give people a little bit of a taste of the audio that you can hear of conversations that not just happened here in Central Florida, but happened in communities across the country. So we'll go ahead and take a listen to that now.
Hi, my name is Teresa. I am from Grand Haven, Michigan.
We're here in Orlando, Florida.
In Liberty, New York.
In Reno, Nevada.
We're in Grand Marais, Minnesota.
Old Town, Maine, also known as El Nabe Menahan, the traditional Penobscot territory.
There in Colchester at the Vermont Public Studio. Did you grow up near Chicago?
Yes.
I did too.
What town?
Winnetka.
Evanston.
We grew up so close to each other.
Isn't that funny?
Could you briefly describe, in your own words, your personal political values?
I would describe myself as an independent.
I'm a constitutional conservative.
I have always been no party affiliation, to my father's dismay, because he was very Republican.
I went from being super conservative to extremely liberal, and that's kind of been a unusual transformation, let's just say that.
What made you want to do this interview today?
You know, I'm just incredibly disturbed about the animosity between political extremes in our culture.
I do think it's important for us to listen to other people and understand why people think the way they do and where they come from.
I feel like in our world there's a lot of conflict with race, gender, stuff like that. And I think it's really important that you hear other people out just because you don't know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
Polk County, where I was born and grew up, really taught me that people may not look the same, but really their worldview is every bit as valuable as my worldview.
I found that I do better once I stop trying to figure out where somebody's right or wrong and I just want to know where you're coming from. Because I've always been able to go, oh, I can see that.
So many of us seem to feel very divided from each other. I think there's more that unites us than that divides us. But we have to be able to talk to each other in order to find that out.
Annette, what are your hopes for our country's future?
For our country's future, I want everyone's voice to be heard, and I think that that's possible.
I like that we both want to have a bigger voice. That's very affirming for me.
Everybody deserves a place at the table.
Everybody does.
It's important that people make efforts, like One Small Step, to reach across the divide and talk with each other.
So this One Small Step program is a great advancement in trying to restore some civility to these conversations.
Thank you, Isaiah, for being my conversation partner. This conversation has given me a lot of hope for the future.
I wasn't sure what to expect, and it was really nice to actually have a conversation with somebody who's gone through a similar journey as I have, but from very different ways.
I'm eternally grateful that this worked out the way that it did, because I was definitely not prepared for that at all. I am very, very grateful, and I think that you did a fantastic job today, by the way.
Thank you, and you as well.
And just to wrap up, I want to ask you both this question. Abe, Rebecca, what do you hope people who attend take away from this?
I think my hope for people who attend this event is that they come away with some meaningful tools in their toolbox for how to have these conversations, and how a lot of people talked about how nervous they were going into a conversation and then how they were glad that they had it after the fact. And it's kind of like ripping that Band-Aid off. It's really can be difficult to start a difficult conversation or have a conversation with someone that you think maybe we don't agree with. But once you start having it, if you have the tools in your toolbox to have it where you can have that conversation and it doesn't devolve and you can just really understand where someone's coming from, then at the end of it, you might have a little bit of an understanding of, okay, maybe we don't agree on it. We don't see things the same way, but that's okay. We are all still human beings. We all want the same things in life. And hopefully you'll come away from this event with some really good tips on how to actually implement that with your neighbors, with people on social media, with, people in your family, so that you can actually come away from it and start building those bridges and start, coming together and feeling a little bit better about the world that we live in.
I completely agree with about 100%. I hope that folks, are able to walk away with something that they could actually use. I hope that this sparks more conversations. But I hope that this event and all of the work that we have done here helps people see that we aren't these polar opposite groups of people, that we're far more complex, and that we really, we are, I think, as Central Florida, as a region, as a people, far more alike than we are different. And I hope that the tools that you learn on Saturday will help to guide us in conversations that show how alike we are as humans.
Central Florida Public Media Community Collaboration Director Rebecca Fernandez and Abe Abaraya, a facilitator of these One Small Step conversations. Thank you both for joining us in studio.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, Sharon.
You can join Central Florida Public Media at 3:30 on Saturday, that's December the 7th, at the Orlando Ballet. This is for the Building Briges Together, One Small Step at a Time event. This is a free gathering. Reservations are recommended but not required, and you can find more information at cfpublic.org. While you're at our website, that is where you can find every episode of Engage available on demand so you can listen at your convenience. Coming up here today, an Orlando-based designer is in her Christmas era. The woman behind the Mary Swiftmas tree is back from decking the halls at the White House. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. We are officially into the holiday season. If you haven't already, many of you might be planning to pick up a tree this weekend. Decorating Christmas tree can either be a wholesome family tradition or a sap-covered, light, untangling domestic nightmare. Don't even get me started if you add a cat into the equation. Well, for Orlandoan Lindsay Matteoni, designing and decorating Christmas trees is a real passion. Last year, Matteoni made waves with a Barbie-inspired tree displayed at the Orlando Museum of Art's Festival of Trees. This year, she wowed Central Florida with her tribute to Taylor Swift, a tree commemorating Swift's Eras tours, which ends in Vancouver on Sunday after a 2-year run netting more than $2 billion, one of the most successful concert tours in history. To add to the holiday cheer, Matteoni was selected to help decorate the White House for Joe and Jill's final Christmas in the nation's top residence. Matteoni joined Engage to talk about Tay-Tay as a Christmas inspiration and the honor of decorating the White House's Red Room.
I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for art education. I had a really good teacher. I had really good tutors. I really enjoy art as a whole. And I really enjoyed going to the museums in California. I was raised in LA. About 5 or 6 years ago, I decided that I wanted to be able to give back to the community in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it's not always easy to be able to find a niche that's creative enough or that, it just gets your juices flowing. I really wanted to be able to give back in a way where I didn't need to get paid for it. I wanted to see others succeed. And it just happened that I was chatting about it with another designer, and she's like, well, have you ever thought about doing the Festival of Trees at the Orlando Museum of Art? And no, that thought had never crossed my mind. And so I kind of did a deep dive in trying to understand a little bit more of the background of what it is and who it would be helping in the long run. And long story short, I mean, I love Christmas. I always have. But being able to put together a designer Christmas tree and then have it sold, and that money goes to help the community in art education, research, et cetera, as well as helping out the Orlando Museum of Art. I just found that to be such a cool way of not only giving back at the end of the year, but starting a new year on a good foot.
And last year you designed the Barbie themed tree, and we know we had the blockbuster film. This year you had a Taylor Swift tree, the Mary Swiftmas tree?
The Mary Swiftmas tree, yeah.
How did you take that to the next level and create a standout Taylor Swift tree?
Well, I had to do a big deep dive. I know Taylor Swift. I have followed her for years. One of her first albums, Taylor Swift, was one of my favorites, and she has been such an impact on young girls, on the music industry, on how to manage your character, on how to act with class, and how to be an overall good person. Every time her tour came into a new city, the influx of money went up by billions. It was wonderful. And then she ended up giving back to the food banks at every stop, which is a beautiful gesture. So bit by bit, I did a 2-dimensional drawing just on a computer rendering and divided a 13-foot Christmas tree up, and 13 is one of her favorite numbers, to engage in all of the albums that she had completed according to Taylor's version. And then within those divisions, I ended up doing even more of a micro dive and showcased the different details, differentiations, different aesthetics that composed and made up of those individual albums by themselves.
So this year, you're selected to help design for the White House. How did that even come to be? And I need to know, what was your reaction to this?
This has been a bucket list item of mine for 19 years. I have been trying out every year. I got so fixated on the fact that I'm probably never going to get selected that it became a bit of a, one of these days I feel that they're just going to give up and give me the job. After 19 years, you kind of become numb to the fact that you're not getting it. You're not getting that position, that coveted position. But I wasn't going to give up. I knew that eventually it was going to be my turn. And, things always happen for a reason, and just the time frame that it's supposed to happen. And I didn't get upset about it. I didn't lose it on it. I really wanted to be a part of it. And eventually it was going to be my time to showcase my skills within the People's House. So I tried out again this year. It's an application process. It's about a 2 to 3 page application process that you have to write an essay explaining what your backgrounds are, what your skill sets are, and just kind of do a little bit of a overall encompassed resume, so to speak, to showcase your work. And that happened in September. I received the official approval just before the hurricane hit. And it was like the day of the hurricane hit. And, being numb to all the years that I've been looked over, I thought I was going to get another rejection letter back, so to speak. And I received it, and I read it about 6 or 7 times at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I just started to bawl. And I woke up my husband, and I'm like, I think I did it. I think I actually got this. And, he had to read it, and he's like, that's what I'm seeing too. And we just hugged. And I mean, it was a long time coming, and a huge relief just to know that I was actually going to be checking off this major bucket list item that I had always dreamed about doing.
How do you come up with a concept for the most visible residence in the country? Do they give you guidelines, or do they say just go have fun?
There's always going to be guidelines, especially within the White House. There's historical presence there. We needed to act on a level of care and also follow the theme that was allotted to us. I, being a first-year interior designer for the White House, being selected, it was a protocol of trying to convey the design from what another designer brought to the table. And so that was the first time that I had seen the design, was the Monday just before Thanksgiving. And we all worked together at the warehouse, at the White House warehouse, as well as inside the White House, to really bring the overall aesthetic to life in the direction that was plotted for us.
Did you get to meet the First Lady?
I did. I was honored that she stood next to me, and we took a group photo, but she stood next to me, and you're kind of awestruck at that point. When you have such respect for the office and the people that run it, it's inspiring. It's a really cool thing to be involved in.
How did you feel when it was done and you see your design in the White House?
So that's kind of a lead up, because every day I was a part of it, and it was technically 8 days altogether. Every day that I was a part of it, I was smiling nonstop. There was no moment where I was frustrated or annoyed or anything. It was the most exciting time I think I had ever had, knowing that this is something that I always wanted to do. So my face hurt, my cheeks were killing me at the end of every day, knowing that I'd just been smiling and having a great time. And, there's so many cool things. I was working on these decoupage ornaments for the space, and we're sitting in the green room. Me and my teammate we're sitting in the green room, kind of pulling these decoupage ornaments together. And the Secret Service guys walked in, and I didn't know this, but they're technically the ones that give the tours of the White House. And, they walked in, and, we're sitting there doing this art project, and they're like, "Do you want to know anything about this space?" And we're like, "Yeah, please just disclose all the information that you have." And, they were sitting there and just were so, they love what they do. And being able to disclose the artist and paintings, and which president brought these particular artifacts in. The White House is a museum, and it was just phenomenal to be able to be in such a place where everyone just felt so happy to be there and wanted to talk about the details and their particular set of details, and then being able to look out on the north lawn, and you're like, oh my gosh, where are we? Like, it was funny. We ended the majority of our conversations with each other like, I'm going to go decorate the Red Room Christmas tree now in the White House. Like, we would always end with "in the White House." Like, it was that extra level that just made you feel even more giddy to be there.
I can tell how just moving and important this was for you, just in your voice.
They're like, I'm sitting here, I'm kind of tearing up again, because it was such a moment. It was really cool, and I'm thrilled to have been a part of it. I'm thrilled with the relationships that were cultivated. At the very beginning, it started out with a smaller group of us. There was about 47, 50 of us, and we all became really close. And for the weekers, which is what I was, a week-long designer, you had extra time to get to know everybody. Towards the end of the designing process, a group of about 150 ended up coming in to add an extra pair of hands, extra eyes. And so they were there for technically 3 days. But at the very beginning of the process and getting to know everybody individually, knowing that you were all personally selected out of 3,000 applicants, we already had such a commonality and a common bond that it just became so easy to befriend and welcome each other with just smiles and open arms. It was so much fun that at the end of every day, and our days were practically from about 7 a.m. until about 5 p.m. At the end of every day, we would schedule dinners together. So we were constantly around each other and we constantly liked each other, which was even better. Then we would discuss what we did and what the objections were for the following day. And I mean, it was magic. It was absolute magic. And I guess I always thought it would be, and I was hopeful that it would be. But to now sit here and go, we did that. We had a hand in making history this year, and it was an amazing experience. It just, I mean, again, I can't help but not smile because it was so cool.
Lindsay Matteoni is the interior designer and artist for MSTR Studios in Orlando, who helped decorate the Red Room, East Room, and Visitors section of the White House. That is all for today's edition of Engage. We will be back Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Just a reminder, all of our shows are available on demand at cfpublic.org, and we want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about, what you're glad you heard. Send us an email. We'll get it at engage@cfpublic.org. Or you can send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. In the menu, select Send Us a Talkback, record your question or feedback, hit send, and we will get it. And one more reminder before I run out of time, Central Florida Public Media will be at the Orlando Ballet at 3:30 Saturday, December 7th for our Building Bridges Together, One Small Step at a Time event. Thank you for the company. I'm Sharon Stone. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.